This episode focuses on the modern cultural history of Dunbar Cave. I'm excited to welcome to the studio David Britton, who is the park manager of Dunbar Cave State Park in Clarksville, Tennessee. Hi, David. Thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So I'd first like to discuss the park's importance regarding Native American history, which goes back thousands of years.
Right.
So can you give us a brief overview, but particularly of the Mississippian period, particularly the caves, maybe around the 14th century, what they were used for, by whom, discovered, why important?
Right.
Yeah.
So you're very right in pointing out that this history goes back for thousands of years. We know via archaeology that people have been visiting and living and using that cave for at least 13,000 years. What's now the dance floor, the concrete floor in front of the cave, protects an intact archaeological deposit that is one of the few in the country that have an intact stratigraphy from 13,000 years ago to nearly the present. That's almost unheard of. Oh. But yeah, around what we call the Mississippian period, and for those who don't know, the Mississippian period refers to a cultural phase in North American indigenous history, roughly around 800, 900 AD. According to who you ask or which professor field of study you ask, around 1600, 1700 CE, right? So this culture is defined as a highly organized culture. They're engaged in high levels of agriculture, high levels of trade. Within their society, it's stratified. You have class. Leader class all the way down to just regular people like there are today. And they're organized according to what we would call chiefdoms in different parts of the Southeast. And we call them Mississippian because they're in the watershed of the Mississippi River, and that's what that refers to. But probably the most notable thing that people would think of are mounds. All right, so most folks have heard of or seen Native American mounds across the country. And here in the Southeast especially, those were built to extensive heights. The biggest is in Illinois, actually, in Cahokia. One of the second largest mounds in the nation is here in Tennessee, down at Pinson Mountains State Archaeological Park near Jackson, Tennessee. So it's this culture that utilized Dunbar Cave for making art. The art itself is likely tied to cultural stories that existed and still exist within various indigenous cultures. There's a lot of the motifs and themes that we can trace. We rely a lot on art historians to make those assessments for us, as well as ethnographers and anthropologists. So about the end of the 13th century, beginning of the 14th century is when Mississippian people were leaving their marks on the walls inside the cave. So they leave very utilitarian marks, which are what we call cane stoke marks. They're from lit river cane used as a torch, and whenever the ash builds up, they would tap it on the wall to knock the ash off and reignite the flame. So we had those marks all through the cave. Anywhere we can go, those marks are there. Mm-hmm. The art itself is, I guess, do you want me to describe the art?
Yeah, for somebody, you have a great website, so we could send our visitors there, our viewers there, but maybe describe one or two of the images and some of the interpretations. Right,
so there are numerous images. At this point, I've kind of lost count about individual images we find throughout the cave. On a standard public tour that you would get to see this art, there are three specific panels of images that you get to see. One is composed of two what looks like star images. They're subtly different from one another. They use a lot of very classic Mississippian iconography that's still present in indigenous communities today. There's another one that shows us what we call an anthropomorph. It's a person or something shaped like a person that is potentially in the process of changing into another beast or creature or spirit, but it bears a lot of the symbols of a warrior and is likely also connected to traditional cultural hero stories amongst indigenous cultures.
Great. So thanks for describing. What's the difference between a pictograph and a petroglyph?
Oh, good question. So a pictograph is literally drawn, right? So it's using pigment of some type and it's applied to a surface. A petroglyph, think of the root word petra, so it means that it's in rock. So those are engraved. So we have both, and one composition utilizes both, which is very, very rare for that to occur. We don't know if that means that those different parts happened hundreds of years apart from each other, or if they were done simultaneously. But yeah, we have some that are engraved, and around them we have things that are drawn. There's a third type called a mud glyph that is the same thing, but it's drawn into wet mud and then it hardens. There was one of those in Dunbar that was actually destroyed by the 2010 flood.
Oh, no. Okay. Well, so one of the ways that someone could see these is through the tour that you mentioned.
That's right.
Can you give a little idea of what that would be like to go on one of these tours?
Sure. Yeah. So the tour season runs from the 1st of May to the end of September. And reservations can be made via the website. Just go to tnstateparks.com. But on that tour, that's a little more than an hour, and the standard public tour is geared towards helping the visitor encounter this indigenous culture in a way that they normally would never get to experience. So what we talk about on this tour has been crafted in conversation with members of the Cherokee Nation, and as well as archaeologists and anthropologists. And so our goal is to put you in touch with stories of the indigenous through the lens of what we're seeing inside the cave. And that's what you get to do.
Okay. Is this the eastern band of the Cherokee?
This is the eastern band of the Cherokee Indians.
So I have a question about the NAGPRA. So
Yeah.
it's the Native American Graves Repatriation Act, which came into existence in 1990. So do you want to explain what that is?
Sure.
and if it applies to anything at the caves?
Sure. So NAGPRA is federal law that is a means of protecting archaeological and cultural affiliated items. So whether it's dug out of the ground or it's in collections or whatnot, it provides an authority for indigenous groups to repatriate those items. So that's a pretty complicated process. Knowing the folks I know in Division of Archaeology, it's a very complicated process that I'm not qualified to talk about the super detailed part of it. But what it doesn't really affect what we do at the cave so much because, but it does sets a precedent for who we engage with, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And so the Eastern Band of the Cherokee are the federally recognized tribe that would have the cultural ties to remains and cultural items in this area. And they likely are, Mississippian cultural descendants. And so we do envision in the future including other groups as well, the Chickasaws and Choctaws, that also have Mississippian cultural ties.
Well, I wanted to thank you for coming today and thank everybody for listening. This was an episode of the Humanscape of Clarksville, produced by the Institute for the Public Humanities. And thanks to everybody for tuning in for this episode on Dunbar Cave and its cultural history.